Hello, 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 everyone. And I hope everyone is having a beautiful Sunday. And happy Father's Day to all of those wonderful dads out there and granddads and people that are no longer dads that are no longer with us. Um, I know that I spent the day calling my parents, my dad and my stepdad, and I wrote a message to my granddad, and I thought, this is important. So, how I spent my Sunday. I had a very interesting week. I had a very, very lovely friend do something very beautiful. And after a horrible shocker week the week before, and not long after that beautiful friend did something lovely, my husband ended up in the hospital. But it worked out really, really well. He's recovering well. He looks great. I think it went well, everything considering. So, yeah. Okay. Just wondering if you can all hear me. So the audio is good. This time I can be heard. Yep. And the headphones are working good. This is a new headset and I've got a pretty little keyboard with it. So I'm a girl, you can just tell. Okay, so this week we have a lot to talk about. We're going to start off with. Uh, I use a lot from Twitter because a lot of people don't get to see what happens in the Twitter sphere as well, particularly some of my older listeners, and they don't get to see a lot of what happens on the Twitter space. So that's why I bring a lot of it here, so you can get an idea of how Twitter does really engage politics. So if you're not on Twitter and you don't know how it works, message me and we can talk about how Twitter can engage you in a more political view of how things are really going. Something like what PR guy does, he dominates Twitter world, and it's a phenomenal thing to watch him because when he tweets out not only facts, but he backs it up with videos, and then he goes further. So that's why when I talk about the difference between Facebook and Twitter is that you need to be more concise with your messaging too. You get a certain amount of characters that you need to convey something. So when I'm bringing what's happening on Twitter onto Facebook, um, that's because the Twitter world from people in Facebook don't have the same engagement and you can miss a lot. So let's start off with that. With our first story, Tanya calling out Barnaby. This is good, and I can promise you this has that French kiss moment you've been waiting for. Check this out. Now, hopefully, StreamYard has got it all sorted very quickly, and of course, it doesn't because why? Here where it is. Okay.
Anything's possible.
All right. The lead up is Barnaby Joyce, as normal, talking to uh, Channel 7. Now, as you know, most media does not like anything Labor does, whether it's a state Labor or federal Labor. So watch this interaction as Tanya definitely nails the whole situation in one go. So here we go. This is fun.
Anything's possible if you want to work all of Monday, all of Tuesday, and all of Wednesday. But what we do know is that the Labor is going to help the Labor Party federally fulfil their broken promise about having a registered nurse in every aged care.
Now, that setup is not only deceptive, but it puts it out there like, Labor breaks promises, which they don't, and they typically care about healthcare. Just before I get into the heart of how they set up these questions on these sorts of shows, as if Labor is coming from some sort of nefarious thing that they're, actually doing what they politically promise. But if the Liberals do it, that's not that's not politicizing something, that's doing something. It's so weird, the dynamic of how the media portrays it. Liberals do something, that's apparently not political. Labor does something, oh, it's all political. You can't do it before an election. Weird, right? How the political people make promises and then deliver them. But you can't say that it's all being done for political reasons. So, yeah, just before I get into Tanya's amazing response.
Facility, which we know they can't do. And if they enforce that policy, we're going to be closing down aged care facilities. But, I wish them all the best. That people in Victoria are going to have to find themselves $270 million to pay for the nurses. Well, okay, it's their business.
Yeah, Tanya, it's a big, bold promise, Tanya, 3 months before a big state election. Some people, if they were cynical, would say that too.
Yeah, and we've had 10 years of skills shortages from the previous government. Nurses have been in short supply for a long time. Barnaby could have fixed this when he was in government. He didn't. So, of course, it's up to the Victorian state government and other state governments to look around for these sort of measures. But Barnaby's talking about taxes, right? When we see people go to TAFE or university, they're benefiting themselves for sure, but they're also benefiting the nation. They're investing in their own skills so that they can work for other people, and that's particularly true of nurses. So, of course, putting some tax dollars into making sure we've got an adequate workforce of nurses here in Australia, that's the sort of thing I'd like to see taxes spent on, not the sort of waste that we saw under the previous government, where they're paying $30 million for a block of land worth $3 million. I mean, the previous government doubled the debt before COVID hit. So I think it's a bit rich for Barnaby to be complaining about funding to train nurses with that sort of spending record.
Tanya, when we
First
talk,
it's a state government. It's
Sorry,
a state
Barnaby.
government policy, and he did.
See, he's trying to bluster his way through it. I must respond and I must overreach it. That's how they operate. And then Nat Barr has to spoon feed him them lines of, oh yeah, but it's got to be political, right? I mean, this is how they operate. This isn't like the one host with just sharing both points of view. No. She's clearly on the Liberal side in this debate. Watch how this last bit plays out. It is amazing.
Yeah, right. I wasn't going to be cynical. It's just about a state election. There's a complete and utter train wreck, which is the health crisis in Victoria with ambulance ramping. And this is look somewhere else. It's a cynical election ploy.
There's nursing shortages everywhere, Barnaby. There's nursing shortages everywhere because you cut funding to universities. You make it more expensive.
You're the government now. You're the government now. You're the government now.
See, he had to shout her down, because that's how he gets what he wants. And that's a very good point. Let's talk about the fact that Labor promising to put a nurse in every nursing home is to fix a problem that the Liberals created when they were in power. Exactly. That's exactly where we're at. And this isn't something where you can be cynical and say they're doing it for nefarious reasons. No. Absolutely not. Yes, it is a political winner to fix health and education. Why is anyone surprised that that is a political winner? Of course it is. And when you are running a political campaign, you are going to say, I'm going to fix these things. And then you're going to take steps to do it. I don't quite think Barnaby knows how politics works, It's weird that the electorate of New England hasn't quite figured out how to elect someone who knows how to do politics. I just want to randomly put that out there that I'm not sure if Barnaby knows what the job is. I know he says he does, but it's weird that he just doesn't. And another thing in relation to that, what I find with Barnaby is that will do things like make up a lie and say that he sent a 900-word text, and, when ICAC comes knocking, I think they're going to want to see that 900-word text, Barnaby. That wouldn't be a lie, would it? Just putting it out there. I mean, I would resign very quickly if I was him. I wouldn't want people looking for a 900-word text that doesn't exist. They're pretty ballsy to stay. I wouldn't stay in a position where if I knew I did something nefarious, like, I don't know, lied about a 900-word text and received a lot of money for a water envoy position that we can't publicly see what happened. Just a friendly tip to Mr. Barnaby Joyce. Okay, that one was fun. That is a great kickoff. So the next one I want to talk about is property investments that the political people fail to declare. And the reason I want to discuss this is because no matter which side of politics you're looking at, they have this regular thing where they miraculously forget that they got property investment. And this is for the reasoning, because they don't have to pay as much tax and a whole bunch of other things on them. And they do get a lot of breaks for having a lot of investment properties. There's a lot of reasons that they forget that they've got these things. And it's also another reason that they're not willing to tackle the issues around what's happening to renters. Because doing that would mean that would cut into their investment properties. And I do think that there is space as we look at yet another person. This time we have Bridget McKenzie, who has not declaring a $2 million investment property, because you can forget that you own a $2 million investment property, right? That makes total sense to nobody. That's part of my issue with how this is being done, is that their idea of this is, wow, no one's going to notice. Well, we noticed, and it's not great. No matter where you sit on the political spectrum, this shouldn't be a thing. It just shouldn't. So let's break down why this is such a bad idea. Accused pork barreling minister Bridget McKenzie accepted a free Christmas ham from the pig industry, but took 3 months to declare her purchase of a $2 million investment property in Beachside in Melbourne. Her office on Sunday explained away the delay in her declaration on the purchase as a result of her long settlement. But the mortgage repayments could soon prove eye-watering as she loses her $350,000 a year salary as a minister. Parliamentary guidelines require MPs to update and register their interest within 35 days of buying a property, because it's totally normal to just have $2 million property investments and such a ridiculous property portfolio. Have a look at Peter Dutton's on a side note. His is incredible. But I think on both sides of politics, we're going to need to tap into this, because I think that this is where we're going to have a problem, because they've got all these negative gearing loopholes and a whole bunch of other things that they are able to do that not only taps out new buyers, but it taps out the renting market too, and it creates a shortage that we just don't need. And I think that overstimulates the economy, which then it goes to inflation, which is why I think this is a very, very important topic. If you haven't tapped into the idea of why this is going to be an issue, I think you're not looking at it with the 360 view. It's only great if you own your home and outright, and there's no mortgage on it, and you're not having to pay interest on a mortgage or anything like that, or you're just about to sell. That's the only time when this is great. For everyone else, for the for the 98 will be like 85% of us that are left behind. It's an awful, awful moment that do not have this. A lot of people have taken out a lot of capital in the past 30 years for properties that are way overinflated for this negative gearing deal, which most countries do not have, and I have no idea why it exists. That there isn't a good reason for this to keep going. But don't think of it as just touching one power line. Think of it as touching multiple, because they're kind of electrifying the rest of us with their ability to be greedy. And a lot of us get burnt in the process. Those people with mortgages, the people with renting, the people that want to start a mortgage, this negative gearing issue is going to have to come to a head. And I'm petitioning my Labor people to go out and talk about this very issue. And it's more than just declaring your property. There's a lot of reasons. You can't just forget that you did this. Come on, be realistic with me. How much in your job? How many jobs can you have where you can go, whoops, just forgot to be like this? The tax man would be at your door like a crazy person, saying they're going to take everything off you if you didn't declare something properly. The fact that this exists so much in politics where they're like, oh, yeah, sorry, I forgot. Meanwhile, these people have accountants to keep track of every one of these things. So they need to explain to me how that happens, and they can just forget that they have it. This is something that really bothers me that they have. I'm not anti-wealth. I'm anti the idea that wealth is at such a greedy point that it's harming others. That's where I have an issue. If you want to climb to the top of the ladder and be the best CEO you can be, or owner of a business that you can be, good on you. I think you've earned it. You've got a right to it. That's yours, whole hog. The moment you're harming people, how you get that money is going to be a problem. Say you're, Amazon, and you've got this company where you pay no tax, but you're using all the public infrastructure, the roads, the everything, and they even were able to stop traffic lights, to stop. They were getting the light cycles to be quicker at a set of lights before one of their stores to stop a union movement getting the signatures outside of their workplace. Like, that's what I mean. When a business is doing harm to make money, it's no longer just I'm a good investor and I'm doing the right thing. It's not just I'm a mum and dad store. Now you're doing harm to the community, and this is going to be a problem. That's when I have an issue with amazing greed. And I think that this is going to come up more. And I really, really want to talk to Labor about fixing this issue. Look, I don't know if there's political capital to fix this in this space. But if there is, I definitely want to see Labor tackle what's happening with the investment property market and the negative gearing and all that kind of stuff. This is going to have to stop. You cannot tap this out to the very top and do this much damage. It's way too big. And I really think there is a bigger story here. But moving on to our next story. So I don't know if you've seen it, but Peter Dutton just sort of didn't go to a very important job summit and thought, I'll be a little kid about it and just not go. So he got called out for it, which, as it should be. I think that if you're part of politics, and this is something that will affect every worker, and you're telling your people that vote for you and the ones that you want to vote for you, that, hey, I believe in jobs and industry and how that follow on works. One of the things that you have to do is engage the union movement. The only reason that you wouldn't is if you didn't believe in the average voter. That's legit. And no, the big CEO is not the average voter. There is a lot of capital in actually engaging in real time with the unions. And I want to thank the people who turned out in the Northern Territory for their recent protest. It was wonderful to see that people went out and protested their wage freezes, and that there was a lot of support around that. And that wasn't just there, it was pretty nationwide. But the NT, I think, had one of the biggest crowds I've ever seen at one of those things. Peter Dutton. Now let's take a look at how he got called out on that. So, where is it? See, StreamYard has this thing where it likes to muck up where it all is. Okay, and then I try and catch it. It mixes it all up. Okay, here we go. The myriad of workforce issues affecting women will be the first thing discussed at the Albanese Government Jobs Summit. Now, this did happen, and it was amazing to hear. So take a listen to this.
There should be no barriers to people working, no artificial barriers.
Simplicity is really important. It's also got to be fair, though. It is too complicated for small businesses right now.
There's something rather striking about the people who seem to have been doing much of the agenda setting for this week's Jobs and Skills Summit.
There they are. It's hard to believe, in fact, that the government couldn't have found more women to invite.
In fact, they did invite us, they just didn't give us speaking rights.
To secure a better...
Reflecting profound changes in the workforce over the past 40 years, it is notably women, representing workers, business and people on welfare, who have been pressing hardest to publicly shape the agenda that will be discussed at the summit to be held at Parliament House tomorrow and Friday. After all, the single largest occupation group in the workforce now is female professionals. The fastest growing area of the labour market is the female-dominated care sector. Women also now make up more than half the membership of trade unions. But despite this, there are lots of statistics about women in the workforce that aren't so impressive. For example, men in Australia earn $472 a week more than women. Women are more than twice as likely as men to work part-time after the age of 35 and are also more likely to want more hours of work. A key argument emerging ahead of tomorrow's meeting is that the gender gap in our workforce is not just an issue about gender equity, but one which can directly alleviate current workforce and skill shortages, boost productivity and the budget bottom line.
The more we can focus women's economic equality as an economic discussion and not as something we'd like to do because we'd like to be nice to women, or that it's something we do from a social responsibility point of view, but from the fact that we've got talented women who are not able to work the hours they want to work or face some barrier to work.
I think one of the most important aspects of the summit this week will be an acknowledgement that women and women's workforce participation is now accepted as a key economic driver for this country, rather than a separate issue to our economic debates.
According to the National Skills Commission, the country will need an extra 1.2 million workers by 2026, with a large majority in highly feminised sectors such as health and childcare. Data compiled by the ACTU and separately by Chief Executive Women suggest there are between 500,000 and 900,000 women who could be in the full-time workforce but currently are not.
If we just change the settings to make sure that women could participate in work at the same level that men do, we'd have 893,000 more workers available. So when I hear employers talk about skill shortages or labour shortages, why don't they look right here, and this extraordinary value that we have in workers who want to work but are locked out of the system.
The primary reason women are locked out of the workforce or aren't working the extra hours they would like to is a lack of childcare. Groups including the ACTU and Chief Executive Women are calling for Labor's promised increase in childcare subsidies to kick in January, 6 months earlier than planned. But there are major structural issues as well: a lack of places, a lack of workers, and a lack of flexibility.
The biggest issues in childcare are not simply the subsidies. The first big issue is just the availability of childcare. Work's been done over recent years around the profound number of childcare deserts, they're called, where no matter what a family wants to do, even if they can afford childcare, there are no childcare places or centres anywhere near them.
So we think having a free, universal, high quality early childhood education and care system is what Australia needs. That's not a welfare measure, that's an economic measure. If we just halve the gap between women's wages and women's participation, it would add $111 billion to our economy every year. So this is not a handout. This actually makes good economic sense.
And obviously, we've got our $5 billion investment that we'll be making through the budget to improve affordability of childcare and remove the disincentives for women just to not work those extra hours, which we know exist. We know that there's centres out there now who have places available but can't staff their centres, and so those places aren't available for the women who might want to work extra hours. So there is a huge job of work that we're going to have to do around childcare, and it isn't just about investing more money.
Childcare is just one part of the story. Measures to close the gender pay gap, such as through changing industrial laws to enshrine pay equity, are also listed. There is broad agreement that the rates of pay in the care sector are too low, and that the paid parental leave system needs to be changed to remove the current incentives for women to take leave rather than men. These are all moves which advocates say can dramatically boost participation and productivity.
I think perhaps because the borders have been shut and those labour shortages are so acute that people who haven't traditionally engaged on, why it's good to have gender equality and why we should be pursuing this are actually thinking about it and very supportive. Like, there's universal agreement.
A one-off answer is not the fix here. We need to make sure that we change the Fair Work Act so we properly value the work that's done, that we lift the wages in those sectors, and of course give those workers access to bargaining.
At the moment we have disability care and NDIS workers earning more than aged care and childcare, and so in a sense we've got a pool of workers that are shifting depending on where the better pay is, and that's a problem, particularly if aged care gets their increase. That's going to put huge pressure on childcare and finding staff.
The summit will be judged not just on what immediate measures are agreed to, but by the longer-term pathways the government sets out to address big problems, such as lifting unemployment benefit rates from below the poverty line, which can't be fixed overnight.
There are many people that will be cynical about the outcomes of a 2-day summit in Canberra. I'm not one of those people. I think the trick to come out of the summit successfully is for the communique, or whatever comes at the end of Friday's deliberations, that sets a realistic time frame and set a sense of expectation that that Treasury can start to look at those investments as part of the budget process.
Whatever the economic arguments, there is always the powerful incentive of remembering who got you into office, and the fact they are expecting big change.
In the election, we felt the significant impact of the voices and demands of women and those that support women. So I suspect that the government's going to be really smart about this and not squander the opportunity. It is a really important moment for us to start doing the hard work that backs that in.
Okay.
There should be no...
So looking at that, you're thinking that's a great thing to attend. This would be really, really good. So why did this happen? That's a really interesting lead into what happened at this summit. And then Peter Dutton just goes, well, I don't know, I wouldn't go. So let's have a look at how that was taken on a public facing part of that. Okay, I think this one is it. Nope, that one is not it. of course, StreamYard is going to be very confusing because I've got several from the same thing. Okay, Melanie, there. Where are you? Okay, so I know a way to fix it. There we go. Okay, so we'll do it like that. Here we go, just re-upload it. Always a good way around things. Okay, so why did this happen?
Peter Dutton is saying it's just a talk fest. We don't need talk. We just need action, clear policies.
Well, first of all, we invited Peter Dutton and he threw his toys out the cot and didn't want to come. And so the room will be full of people who want to have a go and not just have a whinge. And Peter Dutton just wants to have a whinge. And so I think he's made himself irrelevant to all of this. But yes, there will be areas agreed at this summit where the government can move forward more or less immediately this year. If there is sufficient common ground. We're hoping to find some common ground on some immediate issues. Inevitably, there'll be some other things that will require some other work. But I am cautiously optimistic. My expectations are tempered, but I'm cautiously optimistic that we'll make some genuine progress.
So what this does, it engages the public view into, and it brings it into focus what can be done to brighten the jobs market. Now, whatever Peter Dutton's sook of the day is, I don't care. But if you're going to make him leader of one of the two major parties, you might want to show up and actually understand the jobs market first. I know Mr. 17% is busy making potato chips out of his own face, but let's be realistic here. He has no vision for what the country needs. Now, I believe, like Laura Tingle put out there, that Labor does have quite a job ahead of them in addressing the women's issues in the workforce. Now, the reason that that's going to come up more and more as we discuss it is because not only are women paid less than men by significant amounts at times, but it can also create that daycare issue, the daycare deserts. In my area, that's not the case. You see one at every corner here. But that's not the case everywhere, particularly in remote areas. And that can make it difficult to get that, or in inner city areas. The space for a daycare is difficult to come by, and some of them are very prestigious and charge a lot of money. And incentivizing more women to come to work will be a big deal. Now, the reason that I believe that this is going to be the changing of our economy, if we can tap into a way to make that work, we are going to have some of the best economic figures in history. I'm not just talking about in a short term, I mean history-changing figures. If we can quite literally tap into a market that we have not gained out properly. We have not gained out properly how we pay the women, nor have we gained out properly how to incentivize them or how to deal with the childcare issue. Now, these are three major things that I think the economy would thrive on. And making childcare free, that absolutely is a game changer. And this changes the life of children because, as we know, learning from the day that they're born happens from the age of 5 is when the most information is input. So having that structure of a daycare centre is very, very beneficial to a moulding mind. So the child also wins out too. And this gives a running jump to their educational platform. And there's plenty of data to suggest that not only is it wonderful for the kid, wonderful for the parent, and it reignites the workforce and it equalises our pay, but it's such an economy booster that it's hard to find a negative in addressing all of those issues. But wait. If you're a Liberal, you're probably going to find one. And it'll be some bullshit argument that you'll come up with, and I'll have to magically break down all of your bullshit argument with this simple thing. You cannot fight this kind of thing without being real with people, without honesty. And I invite people everywhere to come and have a look at what they can do to be part of the solution. Because I think there is a lot of solutions to be had in this market. So with that, I'm going to move to the next part. So as the media talks about what happens with the treatment of Anthony Albanese, check out this important speech Albo gave and then have a look at something the ABC did. So the setup here is Albo is talking about an important issue and ABC doesn't think so. It decides as usual to cut away.
Pleased to announce that I'm very pleased to announce that yesterday at National Cabinet we reached an agreement between the Commonwealth and every state and territory government to create an additional 180,000 fee-free take places for 2023. This is a $1.1 billion package, and we've agreed to share the cost between the Commonwealth and the states and territories.
Just dip out of that for the moment, keeping an eye on it, of course. If there are...
Is that not weird that they did this? This is weird that they're like, no, we have the Prime Minister here, he's talking, he's making an important speech. Well, we're just going to cut away from that. But listen to what they cut away to, which is super weird too.
Further news elements that come from it, we will bring it to you immediately.
Britain's Prime Minister Boris Johnson has met Australia's Defence Minister Richard Marles, and
they did it to showcase the British Prime Minister. What is wrong with you, ABC? That is, I don't care what Ida promised you. That's stupid. I don't care. I don't know why this was part of it. Okay, so that happened. Next, for our next one, I think we're going to discuss New South Wales. So, no, is it? Once again, StreamYard, you're gonna make it difficult. So, hold on, just bear with me for just a moment. This one is sometimes it appears and then other times it doesn't. Okay, so today it's deciding I just don't want to be your friend. Okay, so here we go. Here's the one I'm looking for. Now, it would be good if I can make it appear on screen. I now know which one I'm looking for. Okay.
Hey, Rose Jackson here, New South Wales Labor Member of Parliament. And do we all remember Matt Keane, Treasurer of New South Wales? Silver Skivvy, Flaming Waratah. Yep, that's the guy. So we still don't know any of the donors to any of Matt's campaigns since he first got elected to Parliament in 2011. He's still hiding behind the New South Wales Liberal Party, not giving us any information about a single individual donor who's made a contribution to his campaign. And that kind of matters because he's the Treasurer of New South Wales, spending billions of dollars of our money. But whilst he's not interested in giving us that information, he is interested in giving us all a lecture. A lecture about how corporate Australia needs more women on its boards, which is fine, they do. But do you know who else needs more women on its boards? Yeah, the New South Wales government. We have a situation where less than a third of the cabinet are women, where a third of the Treasury boards that Matt administers as Treasurer of New South Wales are women. He also likes to give us all a lecture about integrity. But this is a guy whose fingerprints were all over the scandal-ridden $250 million Stronger Communities Fund. This was a fund that was set up to help councils that were subject to forced amalgamations. Now, $90 million of the $250 million went to Hornsby Council, which is a problem because Hornsby Council wasn't subject to a forced amalgamation. So how on earth did they get such a big chunk of the overall fund? Well, the answer is Matt Keane. As a member for Hornsby, he was in there lobbying his colleagues uphill and down dale for Hornsby, who weren't even subject to a forced amalgamation, to get access to that money. This was the fund that was slammed by the Auditor General. This was the fund where staff in the Premier's office were literally shredding documents so they couldn't be presented to a parliamentary inquiry. So whilst Matt Keane likes to present himself as a modern Liberal who cares about women, who cares about integrity, no, we're not like those bad federal Liberals. Here in New South Wales, the Liberals are different. Well, they're not. The evidence doesn't stack up. He's a hypocrite who wants to talk the talk but isn't prepared to walk the walk. Hey, Rose Jackson here.
So that's going to be how they purport themselves. This is what I mean between the doing and the acting. The federal and state Liberals will always overpromise, underdeliver, or not deliver at all. And that's part of the issue, is that they will always purport themselves to be friends of the worker and helping out them. But are they really, Mr. Johnny Howard, and your work choices initiative that was really terrible for workers? Or what about your anti-union hearing in the Parliament? Or what about when you were trying to force out union members? I mean, this is such a moment where you can clearly see, if anyone is paying attention to our political spectrum, that the Liberals are very anti-worker and very anti the Australian people. But here's the thing, they don't have to be. They want to be, because they get a lot of money in rejecting really sound policy that could help out the average worker. Which means if you're voting for it, you're pretty much saying, I don't like the average Australian Aussie that's trying to really give a go, and not just say, if you have a go, you'll get a go. You know, that's basically where we're at. But also, if you're a Liberal, leads me into the next one, you don't have a good memory. So, Stuart Roberts has a bit of a memory issue. Now, this will be an interesting thing. I think this one's going to come up a bit. Check this one. Claims made by Stuart Roberts on a recent episode of Q&A come undone when evidence examined. Stuart Roberts, MP for Fadden, has a very poor memory. On Thursday night, the former embattled Morrison government minister appeared on the ABC's Q&A and was questioned about his grey wolf resources. The question stemmed from a previous Monday's Four Corners program, The Wolf Way, about the grey wolf resources. In that program, Stuart Roberts was revealed as the coalition MP who had invested in Grey Wolf Resources. Robert listed his Grey Wolf Resources shares on his interest register with simply as GWR. Despite promises by Grey Wolf Resources to many investors, the company was never listed on the Australian stock market. See, now that's dodgy, and was never known by the acronym GWR. GWR was simply how Stuart Roberts chose to describe his Grey Wolf Resources shares on his interest register. On Q&A, Roberts was asked about a question by a fellow Grey Wolf Resources investor, Lorraine Fitzjohn, about how he managed to sell his Grey Wolf Resources shares when so many investors had been unable to and lost everything. Now, that would be considered insider trading for those of you who don't know how dodgy that is. Robert stated that he had written off his shares and that he had also lost everything and that he had invested as other investors had. Robert refused to disclose how many shares he purchased and written off. Robert went on to say that he had instructed by then Treasurer Scott Morrison, because of course it was, to divest his shares the day before Morrison became Prime Minister. And what? Oh, let's go over that little doozy again. Robert went on to say that he had been instructed by the then Treasurer Scott Morrison to divest his shares. The day before he became Prime Minister and 5 days prior to Robert becoming the Assistant Treasurer. Robert replied to the questioner, I did buy shares when I became the Assistant Treasurer in 2018. I was instructed to sell them. I had 5 days to do so, so I wrote them off, zero gain. I lost everything, the same as all of you, by the way. Stuart Roberts became Assistant Treasurer on 28th of August 2018, 4 days after the second Liberal leadership challenge in the week which saw Morrison become the 30th Prime Minister on the 24th of August 2018. Which begs the question, how could the then Treasurer Morrison have advised Robert to divest his shares before the second leadership ballot had been held? In other words, you're a liar. Let's examine why you've lied. Robert first specifically listed his Grey Wolf Resources on the 16th of February 2018. Prior to that, he simply listed Robert Investment House Pty Ltd in relation to his shareholdings. Despite updating his interest in August and September in 2018, no mention was made of the divesting of any Grey Wolf Resources shares. Robert did not update his interest in relation to the Grey Wolf Resources shares until 23rd of October 2018. Well, outside of the 30-day time limit of updating investment interest, if indeed he was following the then Treasurer Morrison's directive to divest in 2018, Robert stated that his interest to register the Grey Wolf Resources shares had been sold. But then on Q&A he claimed to have written them off. That too was an aggrieved shareholder. He had also claimed that he had no connection with Grey Wolf Resources other than being an investor. He failed to mention the gifts of wine and handbags that was given to him by Grey Wolf Resources, and recorded his interest in April 2011 and May 2012. Seems like there might have been a little more to this. Throughout his parliamentary career, Robert had a litany of transgressions, including having to repay almost $38,000 in home internet charges, and naming his father as a director of a company without his knowledge, or accepting a pigeon pair of Rolex watches worth $100,000. Let's break that down a little. He had a $38,000 net bill. Didn't sound sus at all. And that he was doing his weird religious culty thing with it. Not weird. And then his father named him as director of a company without his knowledge. All seems perfectly normal. and then accepting Rolex watches from the Chinese government and then not declare it because he thought that they were fake watches. Kind of weird, right? But he's never actually given back those Rolex watches for him and his wife. But wait, there's more. If we examine Robert's interest register carefully, there is a glaring issue here in relation to the property listed. In his interest register for the 34th Parliament, Robert listed his family home as the property of his spouse, because of course he did. Chantal Robert. In question time 6 on the 43rd Parliament interest to register, he listed Chantal Roberts as having the liability for the home loan, NAB, on the same register on 20 of September 2011. Robert later updated his interest dealing in the home loan. On Robert's interest register of the 44th Parliament, lodged on December 4th, 2013, he lists his spouse as owning a family home with nil liabilities on that property, and then another home with NAB, which appears in this time Stuart Roberts' name. The second home loan is never deleted, nor does it appear again in any other interest of his registers of liability. Robert does not clarify what the second loan relates to, and at this stage Roberts did not own a home. His spouse did, and the previous home loan had been deleted from the register for almost 2 years prior. In his 45th Parliamentary Register, Robert listed his real estate holdings as personal in Nerang, Queensland, but by the 46th Parliament, the family home was once again listed as property of Chantal Robert. This is then in this 47th Parliament, the interest register Robert listed in the Nerang property residential owned by both him and his wife. There have not been updates to correspond with the family home changing ownership at any time. Yeah, weird, right? This is what they do. By the time the 46th Parliament, Roberts asserts assets had grown to include a blind trust, because that's normal. You just blindly give your money to an investor. Vehicles are Hilux SR5, BMW X3, a Yamaha 650, and a Yamaha 125, and a 1930s Austin 7. The Australian coin collection. Robert must have gotten rid of 4 of his vehicles by the 47th Parliament, as his assets listed at the time were watch collection, which he never gave back, an Australian coins collection, Hufflin's collection by the GWR people, and book royalties life of insurance policy AIA SMSF 1930 Austin 7. See, this is weird, right? The watch collection must have included a pick and pair of Rolexes worth about $100,000 gifted to him and his wife by Chinese billionaire Li Rupern. Because he has never deleted this from his interest register, despite saying anecdotally that he'd return them, but offering no evidence to support his claim, officially he still has them. But it's safe to say Robert's pecuniary interests to register at the time of the Parliament are akin to a dog's breakfast and warrant a thorough forensic audit to clarify the massive inaccuracies. That's where we're at. This failure to do the right thing. Now, if you or I did something this shady, I can tell you now there would be an issue. But, Stuart Roberts, yada, yada, yada,
If you watched Four Corners
crazy.
earlier this week, you would have seen the story about mining exploration company Grey Wolf Resources. Now,
I don't think we have time for this, and I so wanted to. Okay, so, in saying that, okay, next story I want to talk about is no rise to Newstart. Now, this will be an ongoing issue. There has been no rise to the Newstart rate since 1994. Now, that part's going to be important. Why? Because which is the age bracket you think would be heavily affected by that? Yes, I'm going to show you data that suggests that the biggest recipient of that is not your young person that's just sort of starting out in the job market. Oh, no. We're talking about a older person that's over 55 and they're sort of being weeded out of the job market for new blood. So while we're having this, I don't know, weird moment in discussing what's happening to Newstart, explain to me why there's been no rise since 1994. Just throwing it out there, why? It seems like a weird thing that we're still doing, and we're at a point where this shouldn't be going on anymore. We need to do something that addresses that. Okay, so by average, the duration of payment of weeks. Under 25, female 45 weeks, male 46. The total number 46. That's roughly the same. But as you get older, the amount of time increases. And the amount of need increases. So while we're having this navel gaze looking at Newstart, I think it's time that we address that we are creating poverty for our older Australians. If you have a look at the average on Newstart, it is around $544. Yet if you are on a old age pension, it is somewhere between, I think it's on this, where it talks about, okay, the age pension age has risen, so that number of unemployed older Australians. The data confirms that there are now 173,196 people aged over 55 on Newstart. They are living on $275 a week, $39 a day. The benefit worth $550 a fortnight. Newstart has not increased in real terms since 1994. There is a growing cause for it to be lifted. Former Nationals leader Barnaby Joyce added his voice to it. Because of course he did. Because being a good person means that you would address it while you're in government. And then not bitch and moan about it later. Okay. Newstart is a hard life for government. Backbencher, he said. To compare what the age pension retirees get a base payment of $843 with supplements, taking in $926 per fortnight. Now that's going to be an amazing difference. For a lot of reasons, this is going to keep going on. So, in this moment, I think we're going to need to address the Newstart issue. But I think we're going to have to address the greed issue too. That's going to have to come up. At some point, I think it's only fair that we make it a something that we address. So when this happens, I think we're going to have to realize that there is a solution and they're not going to like it if we don't fix it. So here's a real worker. There are the profits. He's chasing the carrot, hoping for a pay increase. And in 2005, he's still chasing the carrot. By 2010, they're like, yeah, we're still going to chase the carrot. In 2015, the rod gets extended. By 2020, it's way out here and the executive's laughing at him. By 2022, he breaks it. By 2023, he gets all of his buddies and gives them each a stick to beat the CEO with it. Why does that happen? I'm not pro-violence, by the way. I'm pro them getting a pay increase. That's going to be an important factor as this comes up. And, yeah, I think that's a very important issue. And that's why I think we're going to have to do something to address wages. Okay, so I want to talk about uh, how ScoMo was treated recently. Now, if you're wondering about his life after politics, here's a quick look at how he was greeted. And let me tell you, it is as funny as what you think it would sound. This is funny. Watch the guy in the walking by him.
Good to see you again, Costa. Been a few years, mate. You're still doing a great job and entertaining the group. Good to see you again, Costa. Been a few years, mate. You're still doing a great job.
So even the elderly have had enough of him. We're done with the clown. He's got to go. He needs to be done with politics. But we'll see how that part goes. Now, this is going to be another interesting topic I think we're going to need to look at. So, okay. Okay, so that's cool. Australians don't realise how serious this is. Scott Morrison regulated the Governor General's per project to receive $4 million every year. There's no end date to the document, so it could cost taxpayers over $40 million, $80 million. Nobody knows. Don't you find this part weird that they got all these things that are in there that are very dodgy, but we have to go, oh yeah, no, this looks bad. Let's just wait and see what happens. No, this needs to be stopped yesterday. We can't have that little rort going. But as we're getting to the point where we're going to need to discuss how serious that much is, that needs an ICAC investigation all on its own. But I want to talk about our trust in the media. And it turns out, and it's just basically a propaganda arm. Okay, so finds that Reuters finds that user access continues to decline with a slight 2% recovery in newspaper consumption. On all smartphones staying stable, computer access to news declining at a rapid rate, falling 5%, although that might simply reflect what devices most people use frequently. Online is the most popular source of news, but the figure has been declining since 2016. TV news consumption and social media through print, while down on 2016, has seen a slight uptick. So it was at 43% trust. It has now fallen to 41%, with the biggest component of the wall falling in the trusted commercial broadcasters. As for the most trusted news, ABC is well on the top with 66% trusting and only 17% not trusting. ABC News is followed by SBS, which is another one of our public broadcasters. In regional and local newscasters, BBC News, Channel 7, The Financial Review, Channel 9 News, The Australian, and all of them with ratings above 50%. In declining orders, The Age, SMH, The Guardian Online, news.com.au, Sky News, The Herald Sun, The Daily Telegraph come below the 50% mark, with Sky News boasting the highest don't trust rating. Would someone please remind us who owns the 4 at the bottom of the don't trust scale? And if you think the market is being gobbled up by social media, only Facebook gets news share ratings of more than 20%. So, Murdoch is not as popular as what he thought he was. But I want to quickly run over one last positive story, and it's not for here, it's for the USA. This is a speech that we all want to hear. It only goes to 7 minutes, and that'll be the end of our night. Okay, got to find it. Okay, here we go. Listen to this speech. It is amazing in so many levels.
What's happened is there are not many real Republicans anymore. By the way, your sitting governor, he's a Republican you can deal with. We disagree.
This is Larry Hogan that he's referring to. He is a governor that dealt with the pandemic appropriately. He even used his wife's ability to acquire a lot of masks from Korea, because she is Korean and was able to get those, and helped during the pandemic.
No, I'm serious. But at least he's within the mainstream of the Republican Party. I respect conservative Republicans. I don't respect these MAGA Republicans. And folks, everybody thinks I'm exaggerating when I say this, but they're coming after your Social Security as well. You think I'm kidding? But I'm not joking. Think about this. Think about what they're doing. And it's all there in black and white. He wants to require Congress to vote on the future of Social Security every 5 years. So every 5 years, Congress can vote to change, cut, reduce, or entirely eliminate Social Security. How does that make you feel? Do you want to put your Social Security in the hands of Ted Cruz and Marjorie Taylor Greene? I mean it. But it's not just Social Security. Senator Scott wants everything in the federal budget voted on de novo every 5 years it goes out of existence. That includes Medicare, veterans benefits, and everything else. And then along comes Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin. This is what they put this in writing now. This is their plan. He thinks 5 years is too long. I'm not joking. You think I'm making this up? He wants to put Social Security and Medicare on the chopping block every single year. You hear Republicans always talk about the deficit, right? About big spending Democrats. Well, guess what? When the last guy was president, he increased the debt by $2 trillion in tax cuts. Not a penny of it paid for, okay? Well, guess what we did? We reduced the deficit. The Inflation Reduction Act lowers the deficit by $300 billion over the next 10 years. And that's on top of the $350 billion I reduced the deficit last year and the $1.5 trillion reducing it this year. 2020, you and 81 million Americans voted to save our democracy. That's why Donald Trump isn't just a former president. He is a defeated former president. And it's not hyperbole. Now you need to vote to literally save democracy again. My friends, we offer a starkly different version and vision of this country, a vision of a better America that's within our reach, that's within our hands, if we just vote. If we elect 2 more senators, we keep the House Democrats, we're going to get a lot of unfinished business we got to get done. Folks, look, we'll codify Roe v. Wade. We'll ban assault weapons. We'll protect Social Security and Medicare. We'll pass universal pre-K. We'll restore the child care tax credit. We'll protect voting rights. We'll pass election reform and make sure no one ever has the opportunity to steal an election again.
This is the president absolutely laying into Ted Cruz, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Rick Scott, Ron Johnson, and even Trump. And let's be clear, for Joe Biden, of all people, to tear into those people like he's doing right now goes to show just how extreme and dangerous the Republican Party's become. Let's not forget, this is a president who goes to excruciating lengths to promote bipartisanship. In fact, he goes to such great lengths that it drives people like me crazy. But that's how much deference he's willing to give to Republicans. So for that guy to call these people out goes to show just how far off the cliff the GOP has gone. And how do you know? Because their agenda proves it. As Biden explained, the plan laid out by Rick Scott, the guy in charge of retaking the Senate for the Republican Party, wants all federal legislation to sunset after 5 years. And if you think that a Republican Congress or a Republican Senate would pass Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security again, you are kidding yourself. So if you're a senior, if you rely on those programs, if you have family members or loved ones or friends or neighbors who rely on those programs, or if you're simply capable of basic human compassion and understand that the elderly, the sick, the disabled, and the poor rely on those programs to survive, programs that we've all paid into and that we're all entitled to, then do not cast your ballot for a Republican, because they've already broadcast that if they take majority, those programs are as good as gone. Biden goes on to discuss the fact that Democrats are now reducing the deficit, which, ironically, is what Republicans campaign on. And yet when they're actually elected to office, what happens? The deficit explodes. Because God forbid we don't use every waking opportunity to give a tax cut to millionaires and billionaires. And yet still, they go on TV and tell you, just wait, the benefits from those tax cuts are going to trickle on down, just like they've promised since Reagan took office, when they first started courting big business in the millionaire class. And take a look at this. Notice how wealth inequality has absolutely exploded in this country. And when did it start? Oh, right, just around 1980, when Ronald Reagan took office, in case you were wondering how effective trickle down has been. And finally, good on Biden for being crystal clear about what's at stake in this next election. If we hold the House and expand our Senate majority by just 2 seats, we can finally eliminate the filibuster and pass a law codifying Roe that Republicans have been attacking. We'll protect Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid that Republicans are attacking. We'll pass an assault weapons ban that Republicans won't let pass. We'll restore the child tax credit that lifted millions of kids out of poverty that Republicans refuse to vote for. And we'll finally pass voting protections that Republicans rely on to entrench their own power. Meaning we can ban gerrymanders, we can make Election Day a federal holiday, we can enact voter protections. This is the whole ballgame right here, and we have a rare opportunity to get it done. But that means everyone who turned out in 2020 needs to turn out again this November. Those same people need to recognize that while Trump might not be on the ballot, his agenda, his philosophy, his influence still is. And we have one more shot to stop all of those things ahead of 2024, when Republicans will undoubtedly fix all of the subversive elements that failed in 2020. I know the phrase, the most important election of our lifetimes, is overused and trite, but that's exactly what this is. And for someone as reluctant to defer to hyperbole as Joe Biden to be willing to admit that, then there's clearly some merit to it. So make sure you have a plan to vote, because everything is on the line in November.
Okay. That puts us at a moment where I want to thank you for joining me, and I want to thank all of you who tuned in or watched later. I thoroughly enjoy these lives, and I'm hoping to see you again next week. I hope you have a wonderful week and you've caught enough information to garner you through the week. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful week and good night.